Berserk is a manga series that truly runs the gamut for being able to grasp the full spectrum of feelings, emotions, tones, and atmosphere that a story can even possibly have. Berserk will incorporate beautiful and elegant scenery and juxtapose it against a filthy, disgusting den of trolls. We can have the character of Guts experience moments of pure bliss and love, and then drag him through literal hell and force him into an unbridled rage. And Berserk does not shy away from either end of the spectrum or any of the spaces in between. Though if you are uninitiated to Berserk or have only read the first few chapters before dropping it, you may only see it as a violent, dark, edge-fest fantasy. And though Berserk certainly begins itself basking in that dark, ferocious glory, there is a method to the madness, and that is, in my opinion, of course. You may have noticed that over the time I have discussed Berserk on this channel, I often talk about the more hopeful aspects of the series. I talk about the love between Guts and Casca and how it shapes and evolves who he is as a person. I've talked about the dangers of the Beast of Darkness concept and how Guts must overcome it in the end. And I've even discussed the controversial opinion that Guts doesn't necessarily have to continue his quest for revenge or even fight again. But although I do find Berserk to be a thing of beauty with plenty of important life lessons of humanity beneath the exterior of the chaotic bloodshed, I feel like you cannot be a fan of this series without getting some sense of enjoyment out of Guts ripping creatures and people in half with a giant sword. Blood, guts, carnage. Does it have a purpose? What makes it fit so well within this series? Well, here is why I love the violence of Berserk. If we look at the beginning of Berserk chronologically, or more so the beginning of the life of our main character Guts, named after his unfortunate birth from the corpse of his hung mother and rescued by a woman who was out of her mind and died shortly after, leaving Guts to be raised by a careless man whom considered Guts to be a cursed child and was willing to sell him out as an 11-year-old to be molested. It paints a picture of a character who, for all intents and purposes, would have been better off dying as an infant. Guts' entire life from the very second he was born has been a struggle for survival, to exist within a world that has been overrun with an idea of evil. And I'm not even talking about the omitted chapter specifically, I'm just talking about the will of mankind and how it has created a dark and unforgiving world that literally does not care whether you live or die, and presents a world where dying would be a much, much easier thing to do. Consider reflecting this on our own world, and think about how many awful, disgusting things happen that we are powerless against. Murders, wars, rape, child trafficking, drug use, homelessness, racism, starvation. We live in a world where in one location children die of preventable disease, while in another, we have developed technology to get to space and back in virtually no time. So why should we continue to live if we are born into one of the dark, horrible circumstances? It's questions like this that I think are important to ponder and reflect on. And I think specifically what the character of Guts represents is that undying will of continuing for no other reason than to just do it. There is no reward at the end of the tunnel, there is no pat on the back, there is just the desire to struggle against the darkness. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's all there needs to be. For as many dark tales of people suffering and dying, there are also stories of people who have made it through horrible situations simply by continuing to struggle through them. And again, it's not about a reward, but for example, the longer you continue, the more likely it is that you will find something that you think is worth living for. Or you will experience something so unique and so special to you that it's valuable treasure that nobody else would understand. Now, when it comes to Guts' darkest moments, the Black Swordsman arc or during the Lost Children chapters, there is a strong lesson implanted within those chapters that I see leading to be that Guts embracing that rage and negative energy is ultimately leading to him losing his humanity and destroying his physical body. He's doing the wrong thing, morally. But that shouldn't suggest that I don't fucking love it when Guts is in full rage mode, shocking Rosine with just how much of a stubborn badass he is in destroying her whole world and trying to kill her. Guts versus Rosine is probably the best fight in the entire series. Though there is an overall idea that Guts is going down a path that he should not, Watching it, or rather reading it, is incredibly engaging and fantastic. Seeing Guts beating the shit out of his own body to get this kill gets our adrenaline pumping, because even though we, who have already experienced the eclipse at this point, we are shocked at how far Guts is willing to go. And there is something about watching somebody put 100% effort into a thing without any regard for the future. To see someone be willing to die to accomplish a goal. Because in our real world, I bet you are rarely, if ever, going to be in that position. You always tend to reserve yourself out of some kind of fear or anxiety of what could happen to you. But seeing Guts put full force, saving nothing for the way back, has us looking at a man on the brink of sanity, allowing himself to get stabbed through the mouth in order to take out a single apostle. And I just love this portion of the story, and I really miss that Guts and Puck adventure dynamic too, but that's a story for another time. Now, when it comes to the apostles and astral creatures, Berserk has come up with some of the most disgusting and disturbing monster designs, concepts, and physical undertakings that I have seen in any story. The demons in Berserk are truly demonic and seem to be inspired from hell itself. I have always been a monster lover since I was a little kid. The first movie I ever saw in a theater was Jurassic Park, and I was 4 years old, and needless to say, it left an impression. Not long after that, I found the Godzilla franchise and became a giant Japanese kaiju fanatic. It was my favorite thing on the face of the earth. Later on, I fell in love with the Alien films, John Carpenter's The Thing, even Pumpkinhead. Love that dude. I love monster movies and monster stories, and the more messed up, creepy, and terrifying they are, the better. And I love how Miura takes a concept like trolls and puts his own spin on them, making them even more monstrous and disgusting than the classic folklore. It's no surprise that the Monster Manual video series I created was in part for my love of monsters and creatures and how they work and the lore behind them, and Berserk carries some of the best in that aspect. I think when dealing with monsters, demons, apostles, and the like, it's the idea of a force or a being that is so beyond what we could perceive as normal. It's not like a regular animal, because we kind of understand animals. We learn about animals as kids, but monsters are so much more mysterious, and thus our imaginations make them so much more deadly. Then the crux of the Berserk story happens with the eclipse, and we are surrounded by hundreds of ravenous beasts that effectively kill and eat alive many of the characters that we came to know and love. And it's as gruesome and barbaric as it can possibly be, but it also so effectively puts us in that spot of terror. And there is a thrill with being scared, with having the tension lead us to not just think, but know that our main characters could be killed at any time, or worse. And it justifies Guts' rage, and watching him tear through apostles, blood gushing everywhere, is a type of catharsis that we would not be able to reach unless the terror of these creatures was as great as it is. The worse and more vile you make your antagonist, the better it feels when they finally get what's coming to them. Now, finally, I'm going to touch on the sexual violence aspect of Berserk, a reason that many decide they don't want to even start the series to begin with. And you know, I completely understand that. It's not for everybody to read a story with that kind of violence presented, and I don't think there's any shame in avoiding it if that kind of thing is very triggering for you. But I will say one of the appeals of Berserk for me is how it does not shy away from anything, and that despite an initial presentation that these things may be added just for shock value, almost every case of sexual assault in Berserk has a narrative purpose that carries through the entire series and deeply affects the characters moving forward. It's not just there for a shocking scene and then moves on to something else. No, these moments matter, and the story does not downplay the significance of this sexual violence and what it can do to the mind of a person or the body of a victim. This is a very real thing, and I think Berserk handles it in a very real way. How Guts' trauma as a child affects his ability to get close with anyone or even allow them to touch him. Or how, when he and Casca first become intimate, he sees himself as the abuser even though it's consensual. He can't put himself into that position and winds up breaking down. And I've done a full video on this scene by itself, so I won't go over all of that again here. The link is in the description if you're interested. But it takes a life-defining moment of intimacy with Casca to bring Guts to grips with his traumatic childhood, and it's simply beautifully done and would not have had the same impact if not for the depiction of his childhood assault. And the most pivotal moment in the series, the femto-Casca moment, it's meant to be horrible. It's meant to scar. It's meant to leave us broken, confused, and angry, just like Guts is for having witnessed it. And it leaves several narrative scars that follow through for the entire rest of the series. Guts' unfiltered rage, Casca losing her sanity and regressing into a childlike state. This leaves entire plot lines and ideas of the story as a way to restore her, and that underlying understanding that even by doing so, she will be changed forever due to the experience. And even with things like magic and witches and dreamscape exploring, Casca still must come to grips with what happened to her on her own, even having severe triggering moments while looking at Guts. And lastly, the giant narrative mystery that is the Moonlight Boy, Guts and Casca's child that was demonically corrupted due to what Femto did, but seems to have a will of his own and may have inadvertently screwed up the God Hand's plans by simply his mere existence, perhaps paralleling its father, Guts, by being something that shouldn't have been born in the first place. Fate did not plan for such an occurrence. Berserk shows the best and worst of the world that's presented in the story, and the darker, more violent aspects are things that have significance to the characters therein. And being able to display and talk about what dark and violent things do to the world is something that can be glossed over in much more popular pieces of art and fiction. Berserk has the absolute luxury of being within a medium that it can do basically whatever it wants, and is free to explore these more taboo subjects that mainstream projects wouldn't dare touch. And I respect the hell out of it for that. To me, the carnage of the Berserk story is just as important as the slower, more beautiful moments. It's the yin and yang of it all. One makes the other even more great. The beautiful moments make the darker ones hit harder, and the darker scenes make the deeper character moments all the more important. These are some of the many, many reasons why Berserk is my favorite fictional series of all time, and why I think the violence of Berserk plays a very important role in what this story is all about. Anyways, guys, thank you for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, comment down below, share the video too if you would, subscribe if you want to stick around and see more. Check out the description for the links to that one video I was telling you about, as well as the Discord and Patreon, and see if any of that appeals to you. And other than that, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you next time.